Thank you, Senator, and I want to thank the witnesses. I will be your last questioner today. You've done a great job on this panel on a really important issue. You know, all of us deal with this heinous issue in different ways in my state of Alaska. Some of you may have seen this recent report sponsored by Covenant House that looked at 10 different cities. For homeless youth, almost 1/3 homeless youth in different cities across America have been trafficked. And it's an astounding statistic. So I'm going to ask without objection that this report be placed in the record, and I believe that Covenant House is going to be submitting testimony for this hearing as well. But Attorney General Becerra, I want to get back to this question, and I think it's a really important one that Senator Markey was talking about that's in the bill. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, so I'll put my cards on the table here. But on the issue of resources and prosecution, you know, in my experience as a former AG in Alaska, we had a couple cases with regard to sex trafficking relating to the Mann Act, and that's the federal law that prevents or makes it a crime to conduct sex trafficking across state lines. And it was a frustration for me as the AG because we had cases where there was evidence, very clear evidence. State prosecutors, state investigators were ready to go, and for whatever reason, the feds weren't. Yeah. So one of the first bills that I actually introduced in the Senate last Congress, and it got passed into law, signed by President Obama as part of the broader human trafficking bill that we got, was called the Mann Act Cooperation Act. And what it essentially said was that if there is evidence that a state AG brings to the feds to be cross-designated to pursue a Mann Act violation, that the Attorney General of the United States shall cross-designate, for example, you, for Mann Act violations. I'm trying to get the word out to AGs, so please help spread the word, because that's a new power that you have. Yeah. And the Attorney General of the United States can only say no to that cross-designation if it would, quote, undermine the administration of justice, and then the Attorney General would have to send you, if you were requesting that, a detailed explanation of that within 60 days. So it's an enormous power on sex trafficking for our AGs, which is why I think very strongly your point and the others here on this issue of allowing state officials to bring these prosecutions. In my experience, particularly on Mann Act cases, there's so much of that going on, and the feds only have so many resources. So I would, again, just welcome any of you to talk about that, whether it's Mann Act or that provision in this law, but I think it's absolutely essential. And it's not trying to usurp the feds' power or to create a patchwork. It's trying to bring more resources to an enormously big problem in our country. And I think AGs like you who are motivated on this can do that. You can do it on the Mann Act right now. Please go use that new law. But you can do it here, and I think it's important. So again, I'd like to open this up to all the witnesses just on this question. The pros and cons of that provision in this bill, you see why I think it's important. And I'd love to hear from either side on this, why you think it's important or why you think it would be a problem. Attorney General, why don't we begin with you, sir?
Senator, first, if I can just say thank you for your service to the people of Alaska and to this country, both as the Attorney General now as a Senator, and for the good effort to try to help those of us who would like to have that authority to go out there and prosecute these cases.
You have it on the Mann Act now, so
amen. We'll spread the word. We'll spread the word. I will simply say what I've been saying. It's we're not interested in trying to, especially not in California, of trying to slow down just the innovative explosion that you see going on in the internet. We want that to go on. California benefits from it. But we've got to do something to help our kids and people like Ms. Ambrose. And so simply allowing us to do what sometimes the federal government doesn't have the resources to do would be just plain smart.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to take a case from the federal government. If they want to go at it, great. But if they can't, we're ready to step in.
Great. Professor Goldman, try to rebut that. This is a resource issue. And if you think that we have the prosecutors that we need to go after all these crimes, I think the facts would dictate otherwise. So what's your rebuttal on that, if indeed you have a rebuttal? Maybe you agree with that position.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the federal standard helps clear up some of the confusion about the existing bill. So right away, you've, I think, asked a different question that the bill has asked us, and so I think that's a helpful question to ask.
Well, you're okay with state prosecutor under a federal standard?
That helps.
You okay with that?
That helps.
That's what this Mann Act provision does.
Yeah, and I think that's a helpful direction to take the conversation because it cleans up one of the ambiguities that's in the bill. We still have the question about what the legal standard is that the state AGs will be prosecuting and to what extent they will be able, it will be clear enough to them that we are only targeting the, quote, back pages of the world, or are we targeting a larger universe and what that larger universe looks like.
But their standard is going to be dictated by the law, right?
As long as the standard is dictated by the law, and if we have a requisite showing of the knowledge that we've discussed earlier in this hearing, that will help restrict the ability of people to interpret that in different ways. But unless that's clear, there is different interpretations that could be possible. I just want to come back to the idea that though the DOJ is strapped for resources, they have been putting resources on this topic. And so I just want to make sure that we haven't lost sight of the good work that they are doing. And that then leads the question, are they doing enough? And I think that's a question that I'd like to know more about.
Okay. Ms. Soares?
Senator, I would just very quickly cite back to the case numbers that we see at the National Center. This year, so far, 9,700 reports of suspected child sex trafficking. That is a tremendous volume of children. They need the assistance and the support of the state attorney generals in addition to the federal government.
Thank you. Ms. Slyer, do you have a view on that one?
I think that NCMEC should get all the resources it needs to do the good work that it does. It currently gets a lot of resources from our companies, whether that's through engineering talent, through financial resources, developing technology that help track down perpetrators of sex trafficking and locate victims. If I may add a personal note, I spent 10 years doing investigations and litigation on behalf of the federal government, and I do firmly believe if there's one thing the federal government does very well, it's litigation. And so I would like to see more resources go to DOJ so they can prosecute these cases.
Well, look, I think more resources is a common theme, probably with every senator here, all the witnesses. But this problem is growing, and it's so significant that more resources can mean not just federal resources, but the good offices of state AGs. It's a very powerful resource, and I think it's a key component of this bill. If the standard remains the same, which it does under this legislation, then I think having more prosecutors is actually quite an important development here. Well, listen, you've been